Good afternoon, and hello to everybody. And we'd like to welcome you today to today's webinar. And thank you for joining us in this important webinar on the ever-evolving crisis in Ukraine and the other countries surrounding it. The name of our webinar is Ukraine's Refugee Crisis, the Face of War. It is sponsored by the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice. And for more information on other programs by this section and other rapid response webinars, you can go to americanbar.org/CRS. I'm Richard Pena. I'm today's moderator, and I'm vice chair of the section's Immigration Committee, which is spearheading this webinar. Quite frankly, all of us wish that this webinar would not have been necessary, but it is. And you're gonna be hearing from some of the leaders in their area so that we can know the truth, what is really happening. You'll hear from lawyers that have been in Ukraine and other NGOs and humanitarian organizations. But before we begin, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the ABA Center for Human Rights, the ABA Center for Public Policy, Public Interest, ABA Commission on Hispanic Legal Rights and Responsibilities, the ABA Commission on Immigration, the ABA Commission on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, the ABA International Law Section, ABA Rule of Law, ABA Standing Committee on Law and National Security, Austin Bar Association, American Bar Foundation, and the World Justice Project. Now, personally, I'd also like to thank members of the Planning Committee for this, Daniel Appelman and Banki Olabra. Now, this webinar was put together in a short period of time. And I know your invitation, you didn't get a lot of lead time, and we thank you for being on here. But it's a response to the tragic and rapidly deteriorating crisis in Ukraine and in the neighboring countries. I don't have to tell you that we are witnessing the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. Since the invasion of Russia, of Ukraine 6 weeks ago, approximately 4.2 million refugees have fled the country. That's about 106,000 a day. Now, it's hard to get your head around that, but that is a massive number, as you know. Just at the time of this webinar that you're going to be with us, approximately 9,000 Ukrainians will become refugees. This is a fast-moving crisis, and it changes every day. In this webinar, we're going to be talking about the refugees. We're talking about their needs and what is being done, as well as the legal components. It's important to keep in mind that among these refugees that are left behind are lawyers, and some of them are ABA lawyers. It's important to acknowledge all of these refugees and keep in mind that they're all people who just 6 weeks ago were living normal lives. They were going to work, they had hopes, they had dreams. Now, many of them are, or most of them are on the run, and they have nothing. They have no home, they have no country, they have no belongings. Many of them don't know the language of the country they're in. And all of this is a backdrop to the horrors and atrocities that we've seen this past week on television. I mentioned the speakers, and they've been individually selected because of their expertise and because of their knowledge about the crisis. Some have firsthand experience. You'll hear from lawyer refugees, president and the CEO of the Ukrainian Bar Association, a national security expert, other lawyers, humanitarian groups that have been on the ground. We're pleased with our speaker lineup, and especially since it came together so quickly. And again, I'd like to thank the speakers for the time that they are devoting to bringing their stories to you. One of the things that we told the speakers is just tell your story. That's what we want. Now, during the program, we're going to encourage you to ask questions of our panelists through the Q&A, not the chat function, but the Q&A, which will be at the bottom of your screen. Everybody's computer is a little bit different. And if you want a question to a certain speaker, please put their name. That makes it easier for them to respond. Now, we may not be able to get to all your questions, but we're going to attempt to get to the questions as best we can. We'll be sharing this recording of the program with everybody, so everyone will get that, anyone who has registered. And we encourage you to share it widely to your networks, because we feel, and many feel, that this is a very important program, especially for lawyers. But before we begin, like to have some welcoming remarks by the president of the ABA, Reginald M. Turner. And President Turner is a member of Clark Hill PLC. Now I give you President Turner.
I'm Reggie Turner, President of the American Bar Association. Thank you for joining our section of Civil Rights and Social Justice and its Rights of Immigrants Committee for this important educational forum. Members of the legal profession stake our lives and livelihoods on a fundamental premise: to advance liberty and justice for all through the democratic rule of law. This is the lens through which we must view the Russian Federation's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, a sovereign nation and member of the United Nations. It's an attack not only on the people of Ukraine, but on all people whose safety and security have relied on international laws developed largely after the catastrophic death and destruction of 2 world wars. Lawyers believe not in the rule of force, but in the rule of law. We believe that human rights are the bedrock of life and liberty. Our stake in the rule of law compels us to denounce the Russian invasion and rededicate our support of international institutions that promote peace and security. It's also critical that we reaffirm our support of laws, policies, and practices that ensure access to legal protection for refugees, asylum seekers, and others deserving of humanitarian refuge. Today's webinar and related activities of the bar are critical as we stake our claim to ensuring justice and peace for all people. At every opportunity, we must speak out for democracy and the freedoms we cherish. This is why an independent legal profession and organized bar matter so dearly. We must never take for granted our leadership to foster healthy and engaged bar associations that promote the rule of law, human and civil rights, and an independent judiciary and legal profession with the highest standards of ethics and professional responsibility. So please, whether it's through social media posts or a simple phone call or two, spread the words to your colleagues, especially to the young lawyers and law students you know, about your experience with the American Bar Association and how participation benefits your professional growth and our vibrant profession that is essential to protecting our democratic freedoms. With your help, we can grow membership in our association to involve new generations of lawyers who care about the larger issues of justice that are central to what our profession stands for. Together, we promote the rule of law in our communities and throughout the world. Thank you again for being here. May we all continue our commitment to a more perfect and peaceful world.
Thank you, President Turner. Now let's get on with the program. Our speakers today are going to be Alicia Pavlinska. She's a counsel with the Arjinger law firm, which is the 3rd largest law firm in Ukraine, and its headquarters in Kyiv. Craig Redmond, Senior Vice President of Programs for Mercy Corp. Jo Marie Busey, Director of Public Policy for the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Anna Organchuk, the President of the Ukrainian Bar Association. Ina Linova, she's the CEO of the Ukrainian Bar Association. Brian J. Egan, he's a partner in national security. Shaden ARPS, Slate, Meager, and Flom, LLP. Smita Dazo, Senior Director, Legal and Asylum Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, and Magdalena Paskowski, Advisor and Media Contact for the Polish Federation, MUM, in the city of Kielce. And she will be talking to us from Northern Ireland, Alicia from Germany, and several others from Bulgaria and from London. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into our program, today's program, entitled Ukraine's Refugee Crisis, the Faces of War. We're going to start with Alicia Pavlinska, who is a counsel of Argender law firm. And as I mentioned, that is the third largest law firm in Ukraine. Alicia is with us in Germany. She was living and working in Kyiv until March, when she herself became a refugee, and she fled Germany. Now she's an ABA member, and she's one of those ABA members that I mentioned that are in Ukraine, and she is now a refugee. And Alicia, thank you for being with us, ma'am, and sharing your story.
Yes,
now,
I may share my presentation, right?
Yeah, Alicia has a presentation. It's very unique that we have a lawyer that's actually a refugee. And so we're very honored to have her and pleased. And she has a little presentation of a refugee story, her refugee story. Take it away, Alicia.
Thank you, Richard. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you again for inviting me to speak today. Actually, yes, the 24th of February was the day that divided our life. Actually, as a lawyer, I had plans for the 24th of February. I had actual meetings with my clients, I had appointments, I had plans, but after this date, everything has changed. So now I will illustrate my story with some pictures. It's the 24th of February when we woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning by strange sounds. These were the first missiles falling on Kiev. And actually, I didn't understand the meaning of that, but my husband did. And he was shouting, wake up the kids, just let's have our clothes on and go to the cellar because the war has started. But actually, I haven't believed this myself just during the first minutes, because it seemed to be unreal and not possible in the 21st century, in the modern world, in the modern Europe. On this picture, you see the photo of Kiev on this first day of Russian invasion. You also see my kids in the cellar of our house. It wasn't just properly adjusted to such situations, of course. It was very cold there. On the first day of invasion, we were not sure if we should leave Kiev or not, but actually my thoughts were about the kids, and I said to my husband, actually, we were expecting the Russian army to come very soon to Kiev, and I said, I don't want my kids to have Russian passports, because I was born on the Crimea, and I was a refugee once, actually. I was still registered there in 2014, and I automatically got my Russian citizenship, though I was deprived of any possibility to refuse this citizenship. Just due to my registration, though I was living in Kiev, I got the Russian citizenship then in 2014, and I didn't wish this story to be repeated with my children. So, and on the next day, actually, we decided to leave Kiev. It's the picture of Kiev. On the same night, the missiles started falling on the residential areas, on the apartments, residential buildings. And it was just the last clear sign for me that it's time to leave. On this picture, you also see residential areas of Kiev when the missiles were falling on the first day of war. Yeah, that's the second day of war. Again, the residential building, and everyone was indeed frightened. And so our journey started. On the next day, we decided to leave for Lviv. But we also have a branch of our law firm in Lviv, and we had this plan B. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, we rented some apartments for the members of the families of our colleagues, for our colleagues. On the first picture on the left, you see my kids. Actually, we came to Lviv immediately to the bomb shelter, because when we were approaching Lviv, there was again this air raid siren, and we had to hide in the bomb shelter. So on the left, you see my kids. So that's how our life in Lviv started, from the bomb shelter again. We remained there for a bit more than 1 week, and then our friends from Germany, so a friend of mine from Kiev also came with her 2 kids. We stayed in this apartment with my family, with my husband, with my friend and her 2 kids. And then our friends suggested that they have found a bus and they could pick us up in any city in Poland, our German friends, if we come to Poland. So, and then we made this final decision to leave Ukraine to go to Poland. We went to Poland by a bus. So 2 women with 5 children, because my husband refused to leave the country with us. As a father of 3 kids, he was exempt from military duty. He could live with us, but he made this difficult decision to enroll to the army voluntarily, and he remained in the country because he said that my kids would never respect me if I leave the country. So that's how it happened. He remained in Lviv, enrolled to the army, and currently he is staying with the army there in Lviv. On the right, you see the picture in Warsaw. Actually, our colleagues, I would also wish to say that our colleagues, the legal professionals, we are a very big family. So a colleague from Linklaters, also head of employment from Linklaters Warsaw office, Monica, she met us on the bus station, and we spent some time with her family in her flat. We didn't know each other personally. We just had some common project a couple of years ago. But with the beginning of the war, she started writing to me every day and asking if I'm alive and if I'm safe and my family is safe. So when we came to Warsaw, we spent a couple of hours in her very cozy flat with her kids and with her family. And then we went to Germany. So starting from the 7th of March, I'm staying in Germany with my kids. You see some pictures in Germany. Actually, last weekend, we had an anti-war refugee protest here. We have some small community in the small town where I live, in the Frankfurt area. We have a small community of local Ukrainians and also the refugees who came. And in this picture, you see me on last weekend with the Consul General of Ukraine in Frankfurt, Mr. Vadim Kostyuk. And on the next picture, you also see our protest, our anti-war refugee protest here in this small German town. Yes, and I would also say that on my whole way, I was supported by lawyers, and I'm very grateful to them for that. We as Atzinger Law Firm are part of multi-law network, multi-law family, and when I was just thinking about going to Germany, I wrote to some German member law firms in this network and asked whether they could find accommodation for me, whether they could pick me up and help me with my kids. So, and that's what they did. So actually the law firms found accommodation for me here in Germany, and the partner of one of the law firms just living opposite the street. So that's actually how it happened. And I'm very grateful for the colleagues for this kind of support. On the next slides, you could just see the comparison of our cities, of our peaceful cities before the war started, and the consequences of war. You see Kiev, our capital, on this picture. Then you also see Bucha. You have heard about the atrocities of the Russian army in this town, not far from Kiev. You could see Kharkiv, also the student city, where we have more than 20 universities. That's a student city, and now a majority of them are destroyed. And here you could also see the Mariupol, another city of Ukraine that was severely damaged. About 90% of this city is destroyed by the Russian army. And the last picture is just our empty Atzinger Kiev office. That's our headquarters, and that's how it looks like now. The office where more than 100 people were working now stands empty. So this is my refugee story, Richard. If you have questions, I'm ready to answer.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, that's very compelling. You left your husband behind. Your husband's still in Ukraine?
Yeah, he's in Ukraine.
But I think in our conversation, you said you were still practicing law.
Yes. So, of course, we don't have much clients work at the moment, but as I'm head of employment, I'm also co-head of German desk. I'm also the German speaking lawyer. And that's why I decided also to come to Germany, actually, as a refugee. And I'm also part of our corporate M&A team. But as the head of employment, of course, all employment lawyers now have a lot to do. Clients regarding the employees, some of them still remained, staying in Ukraine, some of them were relocated. So I'm dealing with this kind of legal issues, of course, with some corporate issues, restructurings due to this current war in Ukraine. And of course, the majority of work we are doing is just pro bono. We are helping other refugees. We are helping colleagues, the friends of our colleagues, the friends of our friends to find refuge, to find accommodation in other countries. Also, as a part of multi-law, from the very beginning of this war, we wrote to our colleagues and asked for their legal input regarding the rights and obligations of refugees in every country. And so we received the answers from more than 25 jurisdictions, and we prepared the guideline, which was also translated into Ukrainian by the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. We were cooperating with them, and this guide can be found now online for any refugee, any legal professional, describing the legal framework for refugees in every country. So that's also what we are doing. We are also, of course, doing all kinds of humanitarian help, aid. We are helping charitable funds to help Ukraine. While we are dealing with all kinds of issues, such as we're trying to find some bulletproof vests for our soldiers all over the world, some medicines, equipment, so all this kind of work, because it's just our duty to help the country in any way, even if we can't help perhaps all that much with our legal skills, we're also helping as citizens.
Alicia, we're almost out of time. Thank you for your story. There's a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you, though. One, do you have a message for the lawyers, for the American lawyers?
Yes, actually, we are all lawyers. We are not politicians, but anyway, all lawyers are influential in every jurisdiction. So we're asking our colleagues to put pressure on their governments, if it's possible, so that they support Ukraine. So be it financial support, be it support with weapons, for example, because if not for weapons, we have not been able to defend ourselves at the beginning of the war. It was great support, actually. We are also helping our colleagues to help us investigate war crimes. I believe that my colleagues from the Ukrainian Bar Association will give you more details on this possible help of legal professionals to Ukraine. And because it's indeed important to record all these atrocities the Russian army is committing at the moment in Ukraine. And of course, as humans, not only as lawyers, but as humans, you could also support Ukrainian refugees. There are not so many refugees in the United States, for example, but they are coming and the number is increasing constantly. And we're also asking for donations to Ukrainian army, Ukrainian charities. Our colleagues will also share the details for these donations a bit later. And one more ethical issue. We are deeply disappointed with the approach of our Russian colleagues, of Russian lawyers, because as you may know, majority of them are supporting this approach. They're supporting, they're expressing their vocal support of this war against Ukraine. They are supporting Putin. But we as the lawyers, we should stand for the rule of law, as just the president of the ABA said. So we are calling our colleagues just to stop cooperating with Russian business, with Russian law firms, even with international business, which continues operating in Russia, because By doing so, they are supporting the Russian economy financially, and indirectly, this is also supporting and financing the missiles that are falling on the country, that are torturing and killing, raping our citizens. So that's what we are asking. But Anna Grinchuk, our Ukrainian Bar Association, will also add additional details.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. And we do wish you well, and our prayers are with you. We did have a question that came in, that how are we using the term refugee? Refugee is somebody who has left Ukraine. They fled the country. Next is Craig Redmond. He is Senior Vice President of Programs of Mercy Corp, which oversees programs in over 40 countries around the world. As a little bit of an introduction, Mercy Corporation is on the ground in Ukraine and Poland and Romania, and it provides funding to legal organizations and is working to meet the most urgent needs in the region. Craig, thank you for being with us. And I understand that you recently were in Ukraine and in the area assessing the situation. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That's right. I was there about a week and a half ago, and to support our teams and also to get a sense of the situation, for myself on the ground there. So it was an amazing to be there at that time. And that said, I was let's be clear, I was in the West. I was not in the place where the fighting was happening. So, but maybe I can say, Richard, a few things. But before I jump in, a huge thank you to you and to ABA. This is really a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you for this opportunity to have this important conversation with you all. As Richard said, I'm from Mercy Corps. I'm the Senior Vice President of Programs there. We're in about 42 countries around the world. We have about 5,500 team members around the world working in those 42 countries. Every one of the bigger conflicts over the last 30 years, we were there. If you look at the Human Development Index of countries, the 20 bottom countries were in every one of those. So it gives you a sense of the kind of work that we do. And maybe before I say a little bit about the work that we see ongoing and the work before us, I'll just say a tiny bit about context. And I hesitate to do that because, as Alicia's moving testimony said, there are so many people who know so much more than I do about Ukraine and are living it right now. But just to give you a little feel for how we're seeing the conflict as a way to understand why we're doing what we do. So just a couple of things on that one real quick. I looked on our own website, and we talk about the crisis in Ukraine, and crisis doesn't touch it. This is a devastating humanitarian catastrophe, and that is clear. An unnecessary, devastating humanitarian catastrophe. And we are all horrified by what we're seeing and horrified by what we're not seeing yet. And that's all very much in our minds, as the news reveals what's happening there further. And as we do this, it's clear the conflict, and we're thinking about how we can respond to this, is moving from a general sort of, destabilization to intensive fighting in the Far East and the South. And our work is sort of pivoting around that. And as we look at the appalling logic of this conflict, humanitarian organizations like ours have to pivot and evolve and move ourselves so that we can continue to be as impactful as we can possibly be. A couple of things, as we think about what happens next, we're likely to see, unfortunately, this increased fighting in Luhansk and Donetsk, and in the South. We expect this month to see more outflows. I spoke to my team this morning, and they're talking about the fact that in some cities like Dnipro, you're seeing larger inflows of people than you ever have, and that's likely to continue. A couple of other things that we're thinking about. Unfortunately, we're thinking about May 9th, Victory Day in Russia, where we're worried about the implications of that, which we know has been historically a time when Russia has used to make certain statements about itself and its place in the world. We're very worried about that. And also worried about Poland and Romania and host countries have been so incredibly gracious And we know from history, we know from other experiences that it becomes very difficult over time to continue to host large numbers of refugees. And so thinking about that as well, and thinking about how those host countries will continue to pivot and work to continue to do the incredible work that they're doing. So what is Mercy Corps doing in this response? Our work strategically falls into three main areas currently. Number one, we're doing humanitarian response work through our network of Ukrainian partners. The wonderful thing about Ukraine is that there is such a strong civil society sector. There are so many incredible organizations to work with. We've been working there since 2015, since the conflict, in the East at that time. And through that time, there are so many great partners that we can work with. There's no need for international organizations to come in and set up a massive network, because there is a network there. And so using that network and all those partners is definitely the way to go there. We have currently about 30 organizations we're working with across the country. And those organizations, some of them are humanitarian, some of them are not. But regardless, right now, they're helping to move food, meals, non-food items into those places where they're needed most. And that network of national organizations, we feel, is so important for lots of reasons. Number one, they have incredible capacity. They're great at what they do. And number two, that really establishes a network that will lay the groundwork for recovery that is to come. Those organizations will be critical, along with local government and other actors in the community, as Ukraine recovers from this conflict. So that Ukrainian response through Ukrainian partnerships is the first piece of our strategic work right now. The second one is the use of cash as a tool for supporting displaced people. As we all know, we see evidence of a lot of organizations, a lot of community members sending goods into Ukraine right now to support displaced people, which is incredible. When I was in Chernivtsi recently, I was speaking there with the deputy governor in one of the distribution centers there, and we had all these goods coming in there, and teams of people, volunteers on the ground, sorting through them, bedding over here, clothing over here, food here, and so forth. And that's incredible and so wonderful and helpful. And it's to the point to where what's really needed is cash. And the reason for that is cash allows people who are displaced to make options, to make decisions for themselves of what they need next. Putting cash into the hands of displaced people means that they're able to buy the goods and services that they need for their families right now, and they can plan ahead differently. That's an important principle that we've seen in so many places in the world where we've done similar humanitarian responses. Cash is such an important tool in these kinds of emergencies. And the other reason for that is, of course, we all know what happens. That money goes right back into the local economy and helps support small businesses and vendors who are trying to continue to provide goods and services to people who are displaced. So the second big piece of what we're doing is that cash work and making sure that people who are displaced have the cash to make the kinds of choices for themselves that they need to make. And then the third piece that we're doing is focusing on return and recovery. We know that people are now, there are many people, my team is telling me that there are many people in Poland, in Romania right now, that are actually looking at returning as soon as they can. Obviously, Ukraine is one of those places that Ukrainians, when they can return, they will return. And they're anxious to do so. As soon as it's stable enough and safe enough, families will return to their communities. And so we're going to be there to help them, to support them along the way through safe passage, as well as the cash that they'll need to make those few initial decisions safely for their families. And then laying the groundwork for recovery that will come. And the recovery will happen, like so many places in the world, the recovery happens much faster than people think. And it happens at a pace that international organizations oftentimes can't even keep up with. Entrepreneurs all over the world, Ukraine is no different, will need to have the tools available to them so that they can get back to work and get their businesses started again and get back to their lives as normal as they can. We're doing assessments on certain sectors, like small businesses, micro and small businesses. We're looking at the critical agriculture sector in Ukraine as well. We know so many farmers are talking about the fact that crops are in and worried about the harvest. So what's missing in that value chain that organizations like ours can help and support so that harvest can happen as normal and farmers can get back to work. So those are the three big pieces of the work that we're looking at right now. And finally, Richard, I'll just say we're going to continue to focus on the analysis of trends, and so we understand the sickening, the kind of sickening logic of this conflict, so that we as an organization can pivot along with local government, local organizations. And we're going to make sure that we continue to follow the lead of our Ukrainian partners and communities that we work with. And so Mercy Corps is going to be doing those things in the months and probably years to come. So thank you very much. Glad for any questions.
Craig, thank you. Thank you for all your work, what you're doing, and for all the humanitarian partners, and for everybody else that is trying to help in this tragic and senseless situation. As we wind down your talk, Billy asked two questions. First of all is, how can I support any efforts? And second, he asked, where do I send the cash? So can you, and for everybody else on the line, I mean, that's a speaker, can you tell us, do they go to your website? And also put it, if you don't mind putting a link on the chat, if you'd like, as to where people can send donations and help.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. If you can and you want to, we'd love to have your support. And we're at mercycorps.org, and so appreciate that. And the other thing, and I think Alicia referenced this as well. The other thing people can do is, I'm sitting here in the United States right now, and reaching out to our representatives and telling them how much we support displaced populations, IDPs, internally displaced people, and refugees is so important. And making sure that there's a critical mass of us who are following these issues. The incredible thing about it, this conflict, more than any in my time at doing this kind of work, has brought people's attention to what it means to be displaced. And I feel like more people are engaging than ever before in those issues. So I really think that's an important one as well.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And the next speaker is Jill Marie Busey. Jill Marie is Director of Public Policy for the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, which is dedicated to supporting Ukrainian refugees, especially in resettlement in the United States. I talked to Jill Marie yesterday on the phone, and I just found it fascinating how the resettlement process goes in the United States and what we're expecting. Jill Marie, thank you very much for being with us. And can you start us off in your presentation by just telling us a little bit about the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, your role, and about the resettlement and what's on the horizon?
Sure. Thank you, Richard. And I just wanted to thank President Turner and the ABA team for another invitation to join you on a rapid response. I share your initial statements that I wish we weren't here. We were just together in September talking about the crises in Afghanistan, and here we are at another crisis. But I'm grateful for ABA's leadership, and we certainly appreciate you all. Again, my name is Jill Marie Busey. I'm the Director for Public Policy at Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. I'm also an attorney with 25 years of immigration law experience. We at LIRS first want to say that we stand in solidarity with our Ukrainian siblings. We are dedicated to supporting Ukrainian refugees and others fleeing Russian violence, however possible. Our mission is to stand with and advocate for migrants and refugees. And our network of partners has a long history of supporting refugees from all over the world, including Eastern Europe. In the last 10 years, we've resettled nearly 5,000 Ukrainians fleeing religious persecution and the ongoing conflict in the Donbas region. Most Ukrainian refugees have been welcomed through what's called the Lautenberg program. It's a family reunification program that allows certain individuals legally residing here in the United States to bring their family members who are facing religious persecution to the United States through the refugee program. And collectively, the United States has resettled, I think, nearly 20,000 Ukrainians in the past 10 years. So before the Russian invasion, there were over 470 Ukrainian refugees who were already waiting resettlement through the LIRS network, and thousands more had begun the resettlement process through what's called the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, or USRAP. 74% of the Ukrainian refugees in the LIRS pipeline will be resettled in Washington and Oregon. So if you're there, hopefully they'll be coming to you soon. In the US today, there are more than 1 million people of Ukrainian descent, many who originally arrived as refugees. And the largest communities are in New York and Michigan and Minnesota. So unfortunately, there have been some really significant flight cancellations and disruptions to the folks who were already in our pipeline, but a handful of folks have come through. As the situation, I think, escalates, we anticipate, the neighboring countries, and as Craig mentioned, in Eastern Europe will need support, and they'll need to work to provide safety for this massive influx, the majority of which are women and children. I encourage you to, if you're interested in learning about resettlement needs and what it looks like and what we're doing, I encourage you to check out this video that I'll share in the chat. I can't do that and talk at the same time. I'm not really good at that, but I'll share it with you. So we're looking and gearing up to support those who are able to come, and we're grateful for the congressional response, which has been to provide aid and humanitarian assistance. Also, you may have seen on March 25th, so 2 weeks ago, President Biden announced that the United States plans to welcome up to 100,000 Ukrainians and others seeking protection from the Russian aggression. We applaud that decision, and we're urgently planning to help newly arrived children and families, and those who will arrive through this program. The timeline for arrivals hasn't really been established yet, but we anticipate most of those who will come to the United States will be women and children. So trauma and mental health needs will be high, and mothers will face a range of challenges, including a lack of affordable housing and daycare nationwide. So through our Neighbors in Need Ukraine Fund, we plan to provide essential support for newly arrived families, including emergency medical care, temporary housing, financial support for basic needs, and more. So suffice it to say, we stand ready to welcome our new neighbors as soon as possible. And I've shared already in the chat our Ukraine Action Hub that has a little bit more detail about what we're doing and what we're planning to do and how you can plug in and support us. I just wanted to say that because the details of the president's plan have not been released or implemented, the majority of Ukrainians who are entering now, and we're seeing right now, we have about 200 in Jacksonville that we're helping to support. They're coming through the southern border, which is not an ideal situation. This is happening generally speaking, Ukrainians require a visa to enter the United States. And we understand the Immigration Service and Department of State are trying to expedite visa processing for Ukrainians. But there are some people who just are at risk and simply can't wait for the bureaucracy, and they need to reunify with their family in the United States. So because Ukrainians can enter Mexico relatively easily right now, they're choosing to go there and then enter through the southern border ports of entry. They've been processed and allowed in because they've been granted an exception to what's called a Title 42 policy that has effectively shut down asylum at the border for the last 2 years. And while we're grateful that Ukrainians have been allowed to enter, we are concerned that people from Haiti, Venezuela, and other unsafe countries haven't been afforded that same access to our asylum system. And right now we understand there are some 3,000 maybe Ukrainians that have come through the border and have been granted a short-term humanitarian parole that does not facilitate access to resettlement services like we normally would provide to a refugee. So that is of concern to us. And that's why it's really imperative that community-based organizations, faith communities, local governments, and concerned citizens step up and help. Because right now, the folks who are coming through the southern border on parole, they just don't qualify for resettlement benefits. So it will be upon civil society, unless the federal government changes that, it will be upon civil society and communities to support these individuals as they're entering into the United States. And again, we do that through our Neighbors in Need fund. We have welcome centers that are provide wraparound services for those who are not being resettled through the traditional resettlement program and other programs. But I'll stop there and want to open for questions, and I'd like to share this resource if I can find it.
Joe Marie, thank you very much, and thanks for your presentation. Do you know what the plan is for the 100,000 new refugees from Ukraine? How are, from an immigration standpoint, how are they going to be let in? On visas, or what's the plan?
As I mentioned, the administration really hasn't articulated a clear plan, and it was not time bound in any way, really. And so, in the absence of that detail, we have made recommendations, and my colleague from HIAS is also here who can share more information. But really, our refugee program in the United States is not nimble, and it's frankly building capacity and having to regroup after 4 long years of the past administration that did harmful things to the program, right? So we really need to rebuild a very robust, well-resourced refugee program that can effectively process refugees from a variety of regions across the globe, as well as rapidly processing Ukrainian refugee applications. And so we're asking the administration to implement some very specific policy matters that would more quickly, more nimbly, more flexibly support Ukrainians who are in need now. And I've shared an action alert in the chat that outlines those policy asks. We also saw that the administration on March 3rd designated temporary protected status for Ukraine. That protects Ukrainians who are already in the United States. As of, I think the cutoff date is March 3rd, they would have had to be here. So they announced this program, which would allow people to be safe from deportation, those who are already here. But again, the program hasn't been opened yet. So really, we are eager to see this administration take more urgent action. We saw this similar foot dragging, frankly, in the Afghan crises, and we need to be more nimble, more urgent in our action to provide immediate support to those who are in need. And we really need frankly, all men and women of good conscience to join us in pushing the administration to do this quickly. We already have people coming through the southern border, as I mentioned, who desperately need support and robust support. They deserve that. And we need to be able to act quickly to provide that support to them.
Joe, or Joe Marie, one question. Jessica is asking who to contact if you want to support a refugee coming to the United States.
That's fantastic. We have had, number one, hundreds of folks sign up to volunteer to support Ukrainians and refugees in general. In the Afghan crises, we had over 100,000 people. The generosity of our society is just heartening. If you're interested in directly supporting, becoming a community sponsor, again, I'm going to put the link in the chat. We have more information about that. Honestly, we can't do it alone. We need communities to step up, whether it be for our new Afghan neighbors, our new Ukrainian neighbors, or those who have been waiting in the pipeline sometimes for decades to come through this very slow moving refugee program.
Okay, and Jill Marie, again, thank you very much for being with us. And good luck.
Thank you.
Next, we have Anna Orgren-Chuk. She is the president of the Ukrainian Bar Association, which is headquartered in Kyiv, and she's the managing partner of LCF Law Group. Anna, I believe that you're in London?
Yes, I'm in London at the moment.
Well, thank you for joining us, and it's an honor to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Tell us what the current situation is with you and with the Ukrainian Bar Association. Is it functioning, or how big was it?
Yes.
What's going on?
Yeah, so Ukrainian Bar Association, we had to relocate to the western part of Ukraine, but now it's fully functioning at the moment. And as I am safe, I can focus on all our activities as the biggest NGO in Ukraine. So, Richard, thank you again. And dear colleagues, thank you for the invitation and for your support that we have received since the beginning of the war. So what shall I start with? You know, during the 43 days of full-scale armed aggression against Ukraine, Russia has committed all crimes that are classified as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Liberation of Bucha and other cities of Kyiv region after Russian occupation also revealed the signs of genocide. And we believe that the crimes committed in Bucha are most likely committed in other parts of Ukraine where Russian military is present. So among those horrific crimes are the following, and this is by no means an exhaustive list: deliberate killings of civilians, tortures, mass rapes. In Mariupol alone, the number of victims may exceed 20,000 of people. And in Bucha, they are already more than 400 dead. Bodies of hundreds of civilians, including children and women, have been found in mass graves alongside the roads and other places. Systematic and non-selective shelling of non-military objects, residential neighborhoods, hospitals, schools. The infrastructure of Mariupol was destroyed by 90% and Chernihiv by 70%. Use of prohibited means of warfare, cluster, vacuum, and phosphorus bombs, deportation. So now we know that more than 40,000 people have been deported from Ukraine. Another category of crimes, abduction of local authorities, journalists, activists. Russia's denial of humanitarian assistance to Ukrainian civilians who are effectively kept hostage by Russian forces. Shooting off columns of buses and cars, as well as pedestrian refugees during evacuation in the previously negotiated humanitarian corridors. So all this testifies to the undisguised policy of destroying the Ukrainian nation as a whole, the crime truly comparable to Holocaust, both in cruelty and someday likely in scale, if it's not stopped immediately. So what shall we do? What do we have to do as lawyers? I believe, and UBA believes, that 4 key steps are needed. So first of all, it's establishing of the special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. European Court of Justice, European Court of Human Rights, International Criminal Court already review cases regarding the war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, none of these judicial institutions has a jurisdiction over crime of aggression. Establishment of a dedicated tribunal is necessary for prosecuting political and military leadership of Russia in full. Very important that this tribunal should have jurisdiction over those individuals and entities who is financing this war. And support of American legal community in this respect is very important for us. Secondly, full economic isolation. California and New York already prepared draft laws banning commercial relation with companies who continue business in Russia. And Alicia has already mentioned this. So we welcome such initiatives, and we suggest to introduce a similar approach at the national level. Every day of war costs Russia about $20 billion. And this money comes from companies who pay taxes in Russia. So full economic embargo is the only alternative to a very long and damaging war in Ukraine. The third step, establishment of an international damage compensation mechanism. As already Greg said, recovery will happen, but we'd like to this happens as soon as possible. So this step is necessary now, since the process might take some time. And together with the development of such mechanism, we ask the US and EU to develop a procedure for confiscation of the property under sanctions and implement such a procedure into national legislation. Money released from such a confiscation should be directed in a trust fund that could be used laterally to recover all damages. And in addition, we need your expertise, we need your help in investigating and documenting all war crimes now, when the crimes are still being committed. So UBA works jointly together with the IBA to disseminate the eyewitness to atrocity application. In addition, together with other civil society organizations, we prepared and filed a report to the Organization of Security and Cooperation in the EU on crimes that have been committed in Ukraine. So we also have many people on the ground and look forward into forming teams for evidence collection. And of course, we provide support to our members. There are around 60,000 attorneys in Ukraine. Half of them are women. And our estimates that around 2/3 of female lawyers have left the country, but we are still continuing work. Thus, the Ukrainian legal profession is now dominated by women who are defending the legal system while male lawyers defend the country. So I will pass the floor to my colleague Ina Lenova, and she will elaborate on UBA activities in helping refugees and lawyers. Thank you, Richard.
Anna, thank you so much, and our heart goes out to you and all of our colleagues. I think the lawyers that are watching would want to know, is there still a justice system? Are there courts? Is there any law still in Ukraine? And what are the lawyers that were left behind? What are they doing?
I mean, the justice system, the courts are still operating. Actually, tomorrow we're going to have a webinar with the Supreme Court, and we will disseminate the main ideas that we're going to discuss there. And all, my male colleagues, they are joining military defense forces, and my female colleagues were still working. We're still providing services to our clients. So it's very difficult. It's very challenging, but we are trying to keep on all our legal services.
I'd like to thank you for not only being with us here, but for your courage and for your dedication to the rule of law. And we are, firmly aware that the legal profession does not stop at a state or city, a state or a country. We are one throughout the world. And so we are here to support you. And
thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. We're going to turn our attention to your friend, the CEO of the Ukrainian Bar Association, Ina Lenova. And Lena, thank you for joining us. I understand you're joining us from Bulgaria.
Yes, that's correct. Dear Richard, dear colleagues, I am currently in Bulgaria. We spent around 1 month in the west of the country with my mom. However, then we decided to move abroad just because it's more convenient and better. The West is not an active war zone. However, very often electricity is off and internet is off. So it was inconvenient to work, and my good functioning for work was very much needed. So I am here. However, I am very grateful for the invitation, and I'm very glad to be able to participate in this event. And honestly, I'm very pleased and humbled to see so much support and hear about so much support coming towards Ukraine and its people. And this is truly amazing, very unfortunate circumstances, but we are grateful for any assistance as big or as small that we can receive. I would like, if I may, to add a little bit towards what my colleagues Alicia and Anna were talking about, and in fact, what the President Turner mentioned about the role of the legal profession, because as my colleagues started explaining, we do think that there's a lot more that legal community can do, and we, UBA as the biggest legal non-governmental organization in Ukraine, are advancing for. First and foremost, we see that recognition of war crimes that Russian Federation is committing is recognition of and calling the war crimes for war crimes is very important. Unfortunately, we don't see much of a response from Russian legal community. We see various high-level Russian officials and associations of the Russian Federation supporting the narrative of the Kremlin. And we believe that it is of the utmost importance now that lawyers call the events in Ukraine for what they are. Relevant statements, unfortunately, as I said, were released by the Association of Russian Lawyers. We shared the information on them among our international partners, and we're trying to rebut these statements. We see that Russia is confusing major notions of the international law. They call aggressive war, they call collective defense, and they call genocide as measures of demilitarization and denazification, and as they call it. And it is for, of course, it is up for civil society activists, journalists to inform the world and to narrate on what is happening. But it is specifically up for lawyers to call out the things and to label the things correctly. This will facilitate very proper international response, will facilitate judicial proceedings that will happen and will help these international judicial institutions that we mentioned today to review cases and to hopefully come up with judgments faster. Thus, it is, as I said, it's very important that the legal community condemns the war, urges liability mechanisms, and even addresses international judicial and human rights protection mechanisms. Then second thing that we believe legal community can do is, as again, it was mentioned before, termination and denial of legal services to companies who are not under sanctions, but still continue business in Russia. We advocate for financial, economic sanctions. We sent hundreds of letters and emails to world leaders urging quick international response, because we see that Russia will not stop until it achieves the goal. So we see that gradual introduction of sanctions does not work. We need rapid economic response. And unfortunately, this economic response to be effective, this economic response should come from all sides, all fronts possible. Legal community is instrumental in supporting operations and functioning of big businesses who are still present in the Russian Federation. Thus, we believe that indirectly legal services enable good well-being of such companies and consequently enable the war. In contrast, cutting the chain of services, of supplies, of essential goods will have a very drastic and dramatic effect and will hopefully discourage businesses from continuing their operations in Russia. Very recently, we issued a statement. It's public, it's on our website now. In this statement, we addressed biggest law firms worldwide, urging them to make a choice and terminate and deny services to such companies. We urge legal associations to spread information and to encourage their members, or at least share information with our members, informing them on our position as Ukrainian lawyers. And we also addressed regulators of the legal profession in various countries, asking them to update relevant regulations and explain that ethical considerations of law firms and individual lawyers is a valid reason for refusing and terminating legal services to businesses who continue operation in the Russian Federation. And this should be okay from the legal point of view. It is our belief, of course, we agree that the rule of law principle affords legal protection and services to everyone. Thus, it does provide for an option for lawyers to terminate legal services. Another thing that we believe is very important is supporting Ukrainian citizens, but also Ukrainian lawyers who suffer consequences of this war. We're very grateful to all the previous speakers who tried to help Ukrainian population, in particular those Ukrainian citizens who want to come to the United States. The US response is indeed a little bit different, and it is further away, so we don't expect many people wanting to come to North America. However, it is one thing that the legal community could do is, for example, to offer jobs to Ukrainian lawyers remotely. Lawyers can stay safely in the west of Ukraine or in other European jurisdiction, and they could work together with American firms where there's such a possibility and such need. We also launched very popular that we see Italian matching schemes with Italian and British bar organizations, and we offer accommodation and jobs to those Ukrainians who need them. Speaking about Ukrainian legal market, we very recently conducted research asking our law firms how they're doing in times of war, and we're finalizing the information, and the report will be published on our website soon, and we'll be glad to share it with the ABA. Very briefly, none of law firms said that they're working in full mode. 70% combine work with volunteering, and 30% of law firms have ceased their activities at the moment. Only 40% of companies have sufficient financial reserves, meaning funds that will be enough for a maximum of 3-4 months. Thus, we see that unfortunately, the war already has a very devastating effect on Ukrainian legal market, and any support to Ukrainian lawyers will be appreciated. We very briefly to mention other streams of work that we're doing. We're in the first few days of the war, UBA has created a hotline where we offer free legal assistance to anyone who has any questions, either person or businesses connected with the war. Now we have around 200 lawyers volunteering their time for our hotline, and we have processed way more than 1,000 requests at the moment. We want to broaden and further develop our hotline. We're currently developing a dedicated website, and we would like to engage lawyers from other jurisdictions directly so that they could consult Ukrainian citizens who have questions regarding specific jurisdictions. Thus, if any of you would like to join our hotline, please contact us and we'll be happy to connect you. As Anna has mentioned, we are very active in working with the Office of the Prosecutor General, with civil society, with international partners on trying to collect evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity. We have filed the first report to the OSCE under the Moscow mechanism. We have formed a group of another 35 volunteers who will do open source investigation and a preparation of a report that will go into various institutions. And also, as Anna mentioned, we plan to form mobile teams on the ground because many of our members, UBA is an association of 7,000 members, and we have units in all regions of Ukraine. So even now we have members who are in those war zones, and we receive a lot of calls from our members asking how they can contribute, how they want to go and take pictures of whatever atrocities are being committed. Speaking of members in war zones, and going back to your previous question, Richard, if I may, thank you to ABA for providing us a very good platform for dissemination of information, which is ABA Journal. We recently participated in an interview, and there's an article with our interview released. And there you can see pictures of our members, our colleagues who took their arms up and went to fight either as part of military or as part of territorial guards, which are civilian units who protect various parts of cities. We have Supreme Court judges who went to war. We have our lawyers from big law firms and UBA management board who went to war with arms up. And so now we joke because it is true that now legal profession consists of women only in Ukraine. I will be happy to also share links for fundraising purposes. UBA has prepared user-friendly slides leading you to official accounts of the National Bank of Ukraine for bank accounts opened by the Army, by Ministry of Social Affairs for humanitarian purposes, and for medical needs of Army and civilians. As Anna mentioned, we are also working on developing a mechanism for damages repairment. In this regard, we're very closely looking into the US system, because US jurisdiction has a very developed mechanism for sanctions implementation. And we hope that together with American and European partners, we'll be able to create a mechanism for property confiscation and sending it towards trust fund, and being able to use these funds later on when the war finally will have ended, and finally we can discuss damages.
Lena, thank you so much. I'm very especially appreciative. You were very concise, and you covered a lot of ground in the time we had allowed. And I hope you understand that we stand with you, and hope you take, and your colleagues take some comfort with that. And if you don't mind, would you please in the chat form how people can help? And you had also mentioned support Ukrainian lawyers. I think people would be interested. So maybe you can write that in there as to how we can support the Ukrainian lawyers, and the links to everything that the Army and everything that you said.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to share information. And finally, please go to our website if there's anything you would like to do. We publish a lot of letters. We ask people to disseminate and support our messages. And on our website, you can find any and all information that we have on the war.
And can we find the website? Can we find the website on Ukrainian Bar Association?
I will send the link in our group chat to everyone. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we're going to move on because of the time restraints to Brian Egan. Brian is one of the lead national security experts in America. And when we started putting the panel together, we were told, and it was obvious, that how can you discuss this tragic issue without the national security implications? Brian's one of the best, one of the experts in the country. He served as senior legal official in the Obama administration, and he's served as a senior lawyer at the National Security Council and at the State Department. He's also was deputy White House counsel to President Obama, and he's provided legal services to Justice Department, Homeland Security, and the FBI and the CIA. Brian, thank you for being with us, sir. And Brian, of course, is a member of the ABA and one of our most important sections. And let me start by asking you, and let you take it away. It's obvious that there are going to be national security repercussions for the United States because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Can you give us your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Richard. And it's really humbling to be here to hear the stories that we've heard so far with my panelists. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. You know, some people in the United States, when they look at the Ukraine situation, say, what is the national security angle for the United States? After all, we're not threatened by this attack. Why should we care from a national security perspective? I think there are lots of reasons we should care, including that this is a crisis, it's a tragedy, there are human rights considerations, but I think there are also national security considerations for the United States. First is just the stability and security of Europe. I think that, World War II has taught us that this is something that is a national security issue for the United States. Stability matters in Europe to us as a national security matter. And when stability is threatened in the way it is right now, we have an obligation to respond from a national security perspective. Secondly is just the idea of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is the UN Charter is built on the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of a member state. And when an ally like the Ukraine is threatened in the way it has been and attacked, I think we have a national security responsibility and interest in responding. Now, what have we done in response? Secretary of State Blinken just today was meeting with the NATO prime ministers, and he kind of lays out a 5-pillar strategy. I'll go through this very briefly. First is we've talked about the economic measures that have been put in place. On the one hand, as some panelists have said, we have not imposed a full embargo on trade with Russia, but we're getting closer and closer as the days go by. Just yesterday, the United States announced a ban on new investments in Russia. So US persons, US companies cannot invest in new Russian business activities from this day forward. And one of the more remarkable things to me about what has gone on is the coordination that's taken place between the United States and the European Union in particular, where even as recently as during the Obama administration, the US and the EU would have different views on how far we should go on sanctions. I think that everyone is aligned now that sanctions are maybe the most important tool that the international community can use as a national security matter to influence behavior for the good. Secondly is just security assistance, military assistance. This has been reported in the press, but really unprecedented levels of military support for Ukraine. Third is collection of evidence in support of the war crimes that have been committed. The United States has announced that it's part of an international effort to document and collect evidence for future prosecutions. So that's clearly part of the national security approach here, as well as some mechanism for accountability down the road. And then fourth is just NATO, strengthening NATO, reprioritizing NATO, thinking about NATO strategically. This is really, I think, kind of jump-started that process where the last administration was in some ways not in favor of engagement with NATO. I think this has really turned things around in the United States, where I think the vast majority of people now once again see our strategic interests being well aligned with NATO. Maybe the final comment I'd make, Richard, is on the issue of refugees and national security. I remember in the Syria crisis, and then shortly after that, in the 2017 years, when there was a lot of talk about refugees not being welcomed in the United States. Why do we welcome refugees? There was a very interesting statement that was put out by a bipartisan group of national security experts, CIA directors, former Defense Department officials that said, look, putting aside all the reasons why we should support refugees, we have a national security interest in doing so as well, because by two things. One is we can at least partly relieve some of the pressure on the countries in the world, the border areas where millions and millions of people are displaced and they're figuring out what to do. They're homeless. And so we can partly relieve that. The numbers we've talked about today will never fully relieve that in the United States. 100,000 refugees, even if we could do it from Ukraine, would be kind of a drop in the bucket for the problem, but we're doing part of what we need to do. And secondly, we lead with what we say others should do. And we say as a national security matter, it's important to have programs around the world to support refugees, to stop instability and things that sometimes threaten US interests. As a national security matter, we have an interest in doing those things ourselves as well. So I think that there is a national security element even to the refugee crisis. So I'll stop there.
Ryan, we can't predict the outcome of the war, of course, but look into your crystal ball, and do you have any idea or some speculation on what a post-Ukraine war world would look like? It will probably be entirely different than what we know now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see some of the structures we have in place where the US and Russia and some other key countries have been the leaders in some ways. Think about the UN, for example, being the same after this conflict. Just, I think it was earlier today, Russia was voted off the UN Human Rights Council. First time a permanent member of the Security Council has ever been voted off any UN body. So, I think we are going to see some changes in the way that the international order is structured and more pressure from the US and the West to treat Russia differently. There are a number of countries, though, that are kind of still on the border or on the fence, I would say. You've got a number of countries that think what is going on in Ukraine is horrific, but are somewhat, I think, skeptical and circumspect about US intentions in some ways. And I think one of the more interesting things will be to see where the Chinas and the Indias and some of the Brazils of the world come out on this conflict and on the US and Western approach, and then how we think about the world after this conflict mercifully comes to an end.
And can you see that some of maybe our adversaries or other powers attempt to exploit the situation?
Yeah, everybody is, there's a lot of self-interest involved in every country's calculation here. What's been interesting to me is just focusing on China in particular. There was some speculation that China would really bail Russia out, that China and Russia, Putin and President Xi had this meeting of the minds, the relationship was deeper than ever. And I think if anything, the opposite has happened, that China has really backed away from economic support of Russia, certainly from military support. And they, I believe, are feeling some pressure. They haven't actually come out in full-throatedly, but they are feeling pressure not to support the Russians in this area. I think that Russia has put itself in a tough spot in some way. And some of the things that are happening from a strategic perspective actually make it quite difficult for some of its friends to stand behind it.
Well, I just have one final question. What message, if any, do you have for American lawyers besides fasten your seatbelt?
Well, I think one of the comments by the last speaker I thought was really interesting, which is, what should you do as a U.S. lawyer? What can you do to help? And what shouldn't you do? Many of us who work in big law firms have clients who do business in Russia, and helping. Part of our job is to help them figure out what to do. So in doing the right thing can be complicated for lawyers, and I would just hope that we can all be guided by principles of justice, both in terms of helping with the horrific things we've heard about today, but also thinking about what you should be doing as a lawyer with your clients, and what you think the right outcome should be from a business perspective. I think it's important to try to keep both of those hats on our heads as U.S. lawyers.
Well, that's a good message, and again, we have time restraints, but we certainly do thank you for sharing your expertise and your time with us, and giving us a little insight into what you're thinking and probably what the government's thinking. Next, we're going to move on to Smita Dazo. Now, Smita Dazo is Senior Director of Legal and Asylum, and it's HIAS is what it's referred to, HIAS. And it's a Hebrew Immigration Aid Society. And Smita, if I mispronounce that, can you correct me and tell me a little bit about your work and what you do, and a little bit about, I believe you all were established in 2001 in Ukraine and have been assisting Jewish migrants ever since.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks to the ABA for having me today. As Richard said, my name is Smitha Datso. I am the Senior Director for Legal and Asylum at HIAS. And so I oversee our direct services work in the United States. So a little bit off on the timeline. So HIAS was actually established in the 1800s to help Jews fleeing the pogroms in the former Soviet Union. HIAS was and is to this day known for being a Jewish resettlement agency, but many don't know we have operations in 15 countries and we have 20 affiliate sites in the United States. So our work has really expanded beyond serving Jewish refugees, and now we serve displaced persons of all religions, ethnicities, and nationalities from all over the globe. Our core programs include legal protection, gender-based violence, protection and prevention, mental health and psychosocial support, and economic inclusion. So in the US, we have a large resettlement program like LIRS. Jill Marie was on the call today. We are one of the 9 US resettlement agencies. In addition, we have a strong legal services and pro bono program that provides direct services to asylum seekers and other displaced persons. And I'll mention a little bit later how you can get involved in our pro bono program if interested. So our history with Ukraine has gone back to 2001. So you are right on that date. We did establish HIAS Ukraine to assist Ukrainian Jews and other religious minorities who were seeking to migrate to the United States. But later, that same organization was assisting asylum seekers from all over the world who were settling in Ukraine. And in 2014, we actually helped to establish Right to Protection, or commonly known as R2P, an independent Ukrainian NGO that provides legal and humanitarian aid to IDPs, internally displaced persons, across Ukraine. And previously, R2P had 10 offices across the country and 160 staff. So what are we doing now? Inside Ukraine, we're continuing to work very, very closely with R2P. They have grown their mental health and psychosocial programming, providing both in-person and remote support. They're operating a hotline 15 hours a day, 7 days a week to support questions about services, evacuation, and refugee status. They're conducting protection monitoring at checkpoints, carrying out monitoring visits to those who are not able to leave their homes, distributing food and non-food items. And HIAS is working closely by actually embedding emergency specialists in mental health and psychosocial service, multi-purpose cash, and non-food item distribution to scale up aid. So while both HIAS and R2P are positioning to serve all those in need, there is definitely a special focus on women, girls, LGBTQ, as well as non-Ukrainian asylum seekers. I think many people have seen the videos and photos of asylum seekers in Ukraine who were early in the conflict, not being told they weren't allowed to board trains, and there's been a lot of concern about how to also assist those asylum seekers who sought refuge in Ukraine. As part of our work in serving this population, we're working with an organization called Voice Amplified. And Craig mentioned this earlier, it's so important to work with the organizations that are already on the ground and to support them for what they need. There are other needs that arise, and it does make sense in some ways for organizations like HIAS that can bring a presence and bring attention and support through our headquarters. But it's just as important to work with the local organization. So we are working with this organization to deliver gender-based violence response services. So essentially, we're identifying and supporting frontline service providers to deliver services to women and girls, including LGBTQI refugees, in Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, and Poland at border crossings and transit sites. and those same populations of IDPs in the hardest hit regions of Eastern and Southern Ukraine. Additionally, since March 1st, we have set up operations in Poland, now based in Warsaw, and at the border with Ukraine, focused on child protection, cash assistance, and mental health and psychosocial support. And we're operating through our partner, Cadena. We have partnered with Airbnb, which has committed $3 million to start up emergency housing in Poland. And most recently, our HIAS Europe, which is technically a different entity than HIAS Inc., has provided financial assistance to Jewish communities in Poland, Moldova, and Romania. We've placed relocation officers in Moldova, Poland, Hungary, and Romania to help people relocate to Western Europe. Last week, I think the 29th to the 31st of March, HIAS Europe and the European Council of Jewish Communities held a conference in Paris to train Jewish community professionals from 18 European countries seeking to sponsor Ukrainian families. We will continue providing training and support to these communities as needed. Many of these are programs that we have helped build out in response to the Afghan crisis in the United States. HIAS built out what we call welcome circles, where communities have been able to sponsor Afghan families. And we're using the expertise and knowledge that we've learned through this program to assist European communities in supporting Ukrainians in their home countries. So that's a good representation, I think, of what HIAS is currently doing in Europe, but most of you are in the United States, and I imagine you have questions about what can you do here. I will just echo what Jill Marie noted. We are thankful that the administration has noted that they will accept up to 100,000 Ukrainians. We think it could be through a full range of pathways, including the US Refugee Admissions Program. We know that the Biden administration has said that it will speed up visa processing for relatives of US citizens and permanent residents, and will dedicate more staff to handle applications for humanitarian parole. The problem is we just don't have any essential details on how it will be implemented. We don't know how many Ukrainians will come in through the US RAP. We don't know if Lautenberg cases will be expedited. I'll note the Lautenberg program, which Jill mentioned earlier, is a specific program to allow family reunification of religious minorities in former Soviet countries to be reunified with their family members here. That's a process that is done through local resettlement agencies in the United States. Unfortunately, this application process has not been reopened yet. It has been reauthorized by Congress, but the application process has not yet been reopened, and we're not yet sure on when it will be.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because we're running out of time.
Sure, sorry.
I asked one question with kind of two parts. Do you know if HIAS' a special focus on women, girls, and LGBTQ plus individuals is because they are probably more vulnerable population? And can you also touch on the mental health crisis, which probably is going to exist or does exist because of the invasion?
Yeah, so as many of the panelists have noted, most of the refugees at this point are women and girls, and they do represent a more vulnerable population, as do LGBTQI refugees. And so, as I mentioned, HIAS and its partners are working to serve all of the displaced, but there is some special attention paid to this specific population whose needs are diverse and in many ways greater than others. And then in terms of mental health and psychosocial support, we're going to see huge needs in the US as well. But what we're seeing is a lack of existing services in some of the neighboring countries that are sufficient to meet the needs of the refugees who are fleeing. I think you said it earlier, their lives have been completely torn apart. I think I saw on Twitter, somebody had posted something about, arguing about eating sushi with ginger or something one day, and then the next day being forced to flee their homes and cross into Poland and have no idea on what they're going to do from day to day. So this is major trauma. It's short-term and long-term trauma that needs to be addressed and needs serious mental health and psychosocial support to meet those needs. So we are actually, HIAS is hiring emergency response MHPSS staff, and we're also working with partners to build out their capacity. And then you asked a second question in there, and I'm not remembering what it was.
You got them both. It was
Okay.
one question with two parts, but you got them both.
I do want to mention how to get involved here in the US before.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Okay.
Tell them how they can help.
So right now, there are limited ways to support Ukrainians in the US, as Jill Marie mentioned. Even though TPS was announced, the way that it works is until it's published in the Federal Register, it's not yet law. So right now, Ukrainians are not yet eligible to apply. But late last year, HIAS did launch a new temporary protected status, or TPS project, which includes a monthly virtual clinic component, run in collaboration with several partners, including the ABA Commission on Immigration. And the clinics were started really to serve Venezuelans and Haitians who were eligible for TPS last year. And we have already made the necessary changes to include Ukrainians in our clinics. In addition, as Jill Marie mentioned, there are Ukrainians who are coming in through our southern border. They're being allowed in through humanitarian parole, which is a temporary status that really allows work authorization, but no permanent status. So they will need to find solutions for their long-term needs. I think, as many panelists mentioned earlier, what we're seeing is many Ukrainians do want to go back to Ukraine once it's safe to do so. So we're not expecting many to want to apply for asylum in the United States. So we are expecting some. If you are interested in being connected with our pro bono work, you can go to our website. I'll put the link in the chat. HIAS.org, take action. Or you can just email our pro bono at HIAS.org. We can register you in to be part of our network, which would allow you to participate in our trainings, use our resources, our toolkits. If you're new to this kind of work, refugee and asylum work, we provide pretty heavy mentoring. We will hold your hands through these cases until you feel confident enough to do it yourself. And I must say, if what's going on right now has inspired you to be active with refugees, remember, Ukrainians are not the only ones at risk at the moment. We currently have many projects to serve Afghans and refugees from all over the globe. And so I urge you to reach out and connect with us.
It definitely is a problem that is not going to go away and probably will get worse and have more work. Nita, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure meeting you. And thank you for the call yesterday and everything you're doing and the organization is doing. And we wish you the best.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Magdalena Paskiewicz. How do you pronounce it, Magdalena?
Hi, I'm Magdalena Paszkiewicz from a foundation, small Polish foundation, Mom in the city of Kielce. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's so good to be here today and listen all that stories. Well,
can I jump in here? In talking to Magna, is how she's called. She was describing the foundation, Mom, which she's a part of, and what they do is they get needed supplies and they they take them to Ukraine and refugees and transport them to Poland and Ukraine and leave and Kyiv, and she's now in Northern Ireland because that's where
Yes.
she's housed, but she's
Yes. Yes,
actually
I'm in Northern
helping them.
Ireland, but working with girls which are in Poland, in Kielce. And used to foundation was quite small foundation which care about single mothers, older people, poor families in our city. But when war started in Ukraine, we just focused on Ukraine from beginning, because we've been really surprised. We've been surprised how big was scale of problems. You know, people start coming, Polish borders be open for Ukraine with no calculation. Polish government just opened them borders and invite them to our houses. Like Kielce, our city, it's not very huge city. It's about 200,000 people living in city. And at the moment, just in Poland, it's about 2.5 million Ukrainian, but just in Kielce and around Kielce, as I have last statistic, it's about 30,000 Ukrainian refugees at the moment, where from that number, only 4,000 went to places which are registered like with government, like hotels, B&B, hostels. Most of them are in private houses. Just people in our city and around city open own houses, private houses for Ukrainian. And as I said, that scale of problem is huge. We operate in two ways. We buying food, medicine, whenever it's need for people which are in our city and around our city. That changed every day. They have different needs. They really came without nothing. So we base of private sponsor mostly, but we are glad we have loads of sponsor outside the Poland, Northern Ireland businessmen, big companies, England, Switzerland. So we try to do best what we can. As well, we're working with Ukrainian people. So we're sending regular transports to Kiev and Lviv with staff, with medicine, all military. Whenever military, Ukrainian military ask us, we try provide them. Unfortunately, we can't provide them some of goods, but food, shoes, sleeping bags, and medicine. We try the best to provide them whenever they need. As well for people who left in Ukraine. I totally agree with Anna and Ina, all what they said. I can repeat the same. Situation at the moment is quite critical. We are, even in Poland, you need to understand that in very short time came so many people to our country, and we are glad we have them, and we are glad we can help them. That's our brothers. We don't see other way, but we are on that level at the moment when we can cross that line, which we are so close to humanitarian and economic crisis in Poland. You need to understand, Poland is not a very rich country. And yes, so many other countries offer us help, but that help coming very slowly. All procedures are so slowly, that people need help right now. They haven't time to wait. They haven't, like, first wave of refugees, first few days, that was people who have time to pack something. They have time to jump to them cars. They have time. Second wave, that was people who ran away without nothing. And they've been glad they can run away and they can be safe in Poland. Unfortunately, we expect another wave soon. Trauma, that's what one of her ladies said, I think, Ina. Trauma is huge. We see that every day when we're working with refugees, that they completely lost. And you, around the world, you need understand one thing. Most of Ukrainian refugees, they don't want to go far away from home. That's why so many left in Poland, and they all try left as close as they can to the border because they want to back. They want back homes. They want to see own husbands, family who left in Ukraine. So most of them waiting. We are not sure how long they will be waiting, and we are more than happy to have them as long as they need be in Poland. But as I said, start be some kind of problems. It's all about money. It's no secret. It's all about money, and hope crisis will end soon. But I really don't see that. So,
Magda, when we were talking, you were telling me that these refugees, they are confused. They come with nothing. Some of them don't even know the language of the country they flee to. Can you touch on
yes, we try provide them lawyer help. We try provide them interpreters. We working of all legal papers, medical help. But as I said, most of them, they are very lost, very, very lost. Most of them, they are mothers with children who haven't any family, any contact in Poland. As I said, that first wave of refugees, that was people who have some connections. They have someone from family or some friends where they can stay and with, they know someone. At the moment, most of them, they're just alone. They are very lost. They see Polish news, and as we even spoke yesterday with one of ladies, and she said that she really afraid, but she wants to back. She wants to take children and back to Ukraine to be close with her husband. And she said terrible sentence, but she said, if I will die, at least I will die with my close ones. And that's terrible.
You were also telling me about transport that your organization was sending. Was it to Ukraine that?
Yes. Yes, we organize quite regular transports with Ukrainian people. We have two warren houses. One it's in Kielce in our city where we can coming smaller transports, and bigger transport is near border in Rzeszów where coming big lorries. All stuff is repacking and sending straight to Lviv and Kiev. We try organize that. Now one of our friends here in Northern Ireland, he organized big kitchen and all equipment for kitchen, and he will go to Lviv, help cooking for people on the street. We just waiting for another transport from Cardiff in England. They will bring all medical equipment. We waiting for two ambulances, which will come from UK to Poland, and then we will pass them on the Ukrainian side. They will be full with medical equipment. So I need to say, as a small foundation, we became in just over the month, we became quite busy organization, and we're growing with every day because we try to provide as much help as we can. And as one of men said before me, cash at the moment, it's time and cash. That's two things which are very important at the moment, because one, that will boost a bit Polish economy as well. But second, if we have cash in hand, we can provide everything quicker and delivered on the Ukrainian side. So,
well, with that, besides thanking you for everything you're doing, and I saw somebody in the chat thanking all of the speakers for everything that they're doing. But why don't you tell us how we can contribute? You have a Facebook, I understand?
Yes, unfortunately, our official website is under construction, but you can find us on Facebook as Foundation Mom in the city of Kielce. So you can contact us on Facebook, and we have official account where you can transfer money or We still very welcome for any donation and any transport of medical equipment, food, blankets, everything what it's need on the Ukrainian side. We are happy to send them. We are still in regular contact with Ukrainian soldiers, so we know what they really need at the moment, and we try provide as much as we can.
And is that Foundation Mom, M-U-M?
Yes, MUM.
That's how they
Mom
find
in
you on
the city
Facebook?
of Kielce.
Okay, thank you.
I shared a link already on our chat, so.
Okay, great. And all the speakers, be sure that we have their donation sites on the chat. And I'd like to say that we're running out of time. We're almost out of time, but I'd like to thank the speakers for everything you're doing and for giving us your wisdom and sharing your perspective with the ABA and with the lawyers and thank you for your honesty and your passionate observations. And I'd like to thank the audience. Thank you for coming and seeing our webinar. It is important that, as I said earlier, we wish we didn't have to have it. And sometimes I'll turn on the television and I say, I don't want to watch this again. I don't want to watch the news, but I have to. And it's I believe our duty to not only watch and understand, especially as lawyers, what is going on, but it's our duty to help as much as we can. Keep in mind all of the organizations that have been here today. Keep in mind the section of civil rights and social justice. They provide free webinars and resources to lawyers and advocates. Think about, if you're not already a member of the ABA, consider joining the ABA and our section. The ABA, it's ambar.org/CRSJ. And you may know, some of you may know the ABA mission is defending liberty and delivering justice. And ABA has lawyers all over the world, and that mission does not stop at the border of the United States. I'd like to thank you for joining us. I do want to take a minute or two to reflect and read part of a letter that was drafted by the managing partner of the Arzinger law firm, which is Alicia's law firm in Kyiv, when he was in Kyiv. And I don't know if he's still there, but it was drafted last month. And it starts out like this. It's an open letter to colleagues, partners, and friends. It says, I don't really know anymore what day of the week it is. We go to bed and wake up and the sounds of air sirens every morning while opening our eyes. We hope that the nightmare is over and it was just been a very bad dream. Even if it sounds ridiculous, people of the war get used to war. In some parts of Ukraine, it's very different. And he goes on to talk about, I'm not going to read all the letter, about eastern cities, which are completely wiped out, with the Russians committing unimaginable atrocities. Talks about Mariupol, how it was such an ancient, beautiful city, and 80% of the buildings are damaged. Kyiv, the famous city, is destroyed. Hundreds of schools, universities, kindergartens, hospitals, office buildings, theaters all over Ukraine keep disappearing under the rockets. And in the end, he talks about, he gives thanks to the international friends and partners which keep supporting Ukraine, but the assistance is obviously not timely enough given the situation on the ground, and it's very important to keep assisting Ukraine. Ukraine is a brave country in Europe. Remember, and this is important what he is saying, and we don't even know he's still alive. Remember, the battleground is not Ukraine, the battleground is Europe. Today they are attacking our homes. Tomorrow, your families will be in Russian shooting lines, while the brave Ukrainian army is doing its best to be the strong shield for your families on Europe ground. We expect other countries to wake up as soon as possible, face a reality, and stop this aggression. With that, I thank you again for joining us today. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, this war and this nightmare is for real. And folks, they cannot turn off this nightmare by turning off the news on their TV programs. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
See you.